Hey, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are. Scott Luton and Gregory White here with you on Supply Chain Now. Welcome to today's live stream. Hey, Greg, how you doing today?
Doing quite well. Thank
Yeah?
you for using the name that my mother gave me. I think her quote was she thought it would sound good in an IBM boardroom.
Well, you
I've
know,
only been in an IBM boardroom once, and they did not call me Gregory.
I watched a Seinfeld
Oh,
episode
Mom.
last night where George is dating a very formal individual, and she calls Jerry Seinfeld Jerome, and it's really funny just throughout the show. So, anyway, well, Greg, back by popular demand, we have got we're continuing a long running popular series, Supply Chain Today and Tomorrow, with Mike Griswold from Gartner,
Yeah.
and we are going to be talking about some critical, must not miss developments across global supply chain today and time in to movies probably from the 70s, 80s, 90s, and 2000s, I bet. What do you think, Greg?
Yeah, I doubt. I doubt I'll reach back for the 40s. So,
No, no. All right, maybe not, maybe not. But folks, we got a great show.
so there is what is It's a Beautiful Life? Is that It's a Wonderful Life? Is that 30s? 1938, correct?
I think you're right
Okay,
without
so
looking.
maybe to the 30s because there are some supply chain happenings that could make you want to jump off a bridge. Wish you'd never been born.
Unfortunately, you are right. Little Shop of Horrors, little updated references. Groundhog Day. Oh, I've got them all teed up right over
Okay,
here,
I
Greg.
can't wait.
All right, folks, we want to hear from you though. So we're about to have Mike join us. We're going to walk through three supply chain trends. We're going to really bake in a lot of probably movie references. And folks, let us know what you're thinking. Let us know some of your trends you're identifying and some of those movies. And like Andre, Greg is back with us, holding down the fort
Can't believe
on
you came
YouTube.
back. Thanks, Andre.
And of course,
You must
Leah
love
Luton.
supply chain.
That's right. Leah Luton with the pride of Aiken, South Carolina. Great to see you, Mom, as always. All right. So, Greg, before we bring on Mike Griswold with Gartner,
Yeah.
let's do this. Let's share a couple resources on the front end here because, folks, y'all know we're on a mission to help make your lives, your jobs, your organizations, your supply chains easier. One of those ways is you can check out our weekly, almost weekly newsletter. We skipped, I think, Labor Day weekend. Our team's got to take some of those holidays off too. So our almost weekly, with that said, LinkedIn newsletter. And here, Greg, we talked about a variety of ways you can really support the veteran community, whether they're in transition or they're already out in the business world. Your quick thought there, Greg.
Yeah, very cool. We talked about that Monday at significant depth, but yeah, that's a difficult transition. So I think anything that business people can do to give vets the perspective on how raucous and how much less organized or structured, I guess, we are in civilian business is hugely helpful.
Raucous. That's a great word, Greg.
Raucous, right?
Thank you for expanding my vocabulary for about ongoing 5 years now. I appreciate that. All right. Also, speaking of resources, and by the way, folks, our webinars are free to attend. You just got to register. Tomorrow, we're hosting Paul and James. Paul's with Trace Gaines. We're talking about 5 steps to getting proactive with digitization. Always trip up on that word, digitization and supply chain data at 12 noon Eastern time. Join me and Greg for that. Greg, quick blurb there. Be there, be square.
Yeah, I mean, what do we talk about all the time? Digital transformation, digitization, democratization, all of the Asians, and yeah. Look, I mean, the world is ever more connected and never more connected than when it is in supply chain.
So true. All the Asians. I love that.
Welcome to the 90s.
And folks, we dropped links there so you can check out the newsletter we mentioned and the webinar. You're one click away. We try to make things easy. Easy is good. Okay, everybody. Oh, little note here. Catherine, and big thanks to Catherine Menda behind the scenes. 1946 is when It's a Wonderful Life was released.
Oh, wow. Okay. So after the war,
Yeah.
I don't know why I wonder what I am thinking of that was 30. Oh, Gone with the Wind.
That's it.
Another one of the big classics. Yeah.
All right, so stay tuned, folks. Stay tuned. We're gonna have a lot of fun. It's gonna be informative, entertaining, and educational here today, as always is. So, with no further ado, Greg, I want to bring in our featured guest once again, Mike Griswold, Vice President Analyst with Gartner. Hey, Mike, how you doing?
Hey, I'm doing well, thanks. How's everybody doing?
Doing wonderful. I just learned that I cannot sneak a drink. The swoosh is not long enough to sneak a drink.
Is that right?
So I got to get better.
I like how you try to do that. And feel like you're on an actual television show.
Right. All right. So Greg and Mike, man, we got a lot to get through here today. But I want to start, as we always do, with a little fun warm-up question. And we're going to celebrate what I bet is a very popular day here in the States. It's National Taco Day here in the U.S., which is kind of weird to me because you would assume, I guess I would assume, that it would fall on a Tuesday. But interestingly enough, Taco Tuesday, the phrase was actually trademarked here in the States back in 1989 by a place called Taco John's up in where everyone thinks of when they think of tacos, Wyoming. So I guess that was a thing. So I'm going to ask Greg and Mike here, like one of life's burning questions. What is your go-to when it comes to getting the best tacos on the planet, or at least in your neck of the woods? So, Mike, let's start with you.
Yeah, so not a big taco fan, believe it or not. We have a very good taco kind of area around me, but I'm not a big taco person. You know, if we want tacos, I actually prefer my wife makes some really good fish tacos.
Okay.
So I'll just head downstairs from my office and we'll have fish tacos. So, yeah.
Love that. All convenient. You're saying you're vertically integrated is what you're saying,
Yes.
Mike. Is that right?
Yes.
Yes. All right, Greg, I think, you know what? No, you always surprise me. I know we have a couple places that we love here in the Metro Atlanta area, but what is your go-to, Greg?
Well, my favorite is Mexico City. I mean, if you want good, what we now call in the States street tacos, they just call it tacos, that you get on the street. Mexico City is great for that. But Tacos del Chavo has to be number one. It's one of the top 5 taco joints in America. And it's also 15 minutes from my house. So
wow,
that's not a bad thing. Used to be served outdoors like it should be. Dumpy little shack where you're probably safer outdoors than indoors. But now they moved into a big old restaurant and brought the picnic tables from outside in. And so you can eat there rain or shine, which is nice. And the place is just packed.
Okay.
Absolutely packed.
That sounds delicious. Both do. I would add, Amanda's telling me that Taco John's, a place that trademark name, is big in the Midwest, Iowa and Nebraska at least. So lots of Taco John's there.
I was wondering if it was a chain because I've actually eaten at a Taco John's before.
Okay. It's new to me.
I'm glad they trademarked Taco Tuesday because they didn't trademark great tacos.
Right.
Not bad.
And I'll just throw one more. So Mike says stays home. Greg shared his favorite, Nuevo Laredo here in off Chattahoochee Avenue, if I'm not mistaken, Greg, across from the Pepsi plant in Metro Atlanta is one of the places to go here in the ATL. All right. So we've got a lot to get to here today. Now that we're all starving, we're bringing back one of Mike's and all of ours, really, our favorite themes, Hollywood Week. So as we were talking pre-show, we're going to get Mike to share 3 key trends in global supply chain that can be associated with movies, TV shows, you name it. Kind of like with the ongoing freight market challenges. Maybe we weave in the Stephen King classic from the 90s, Misery. Who knows? Stuff like that. We're going to have a little fun and inform at the same time. So that does not get Greg's approval, I could tell, with the shake in your head, Greg. All right. So, Mike, where are we starting with our first trend of the day?
So before we do that, I want to go back real quick to your veteran announcement, right, in the beginning of this. I don't have any quotes from the movie, and I think most people who've joined us over the months know I'm a big military history person. 30 years ago, yesterday and today, was the Battle of Mogadishu, Black Hawk Down. If you get a chance to see the movie,
30 years ago, wow,
30 years, hard to believe, isn't it? But if people out there, if you get a chance, see the movie, read the book. The book is better, as it almost always is. But pretty significant event in the course of American military history.
Yeah.
So with that out of the way, let's start with this idea that we talk a lot about here around agility and resilience. And to some degree, adaptability. And what I have 3 movies and 3 quotes. The first is from Jaws. Obviously, we're going to need a bigger boat, right? That talks about kind of getting in the middle of the ocean and having no plan A or plan B. The other thing, as a quick side note, which I want to get to see, I don't know if anyone in our audience has seen it.
Okay.
I came across, there is a Broadway play that is about the making of Jaws. It's got 3 characters. Robert Shaw's son plays Robert Shaw in this play. Robert Shaw, the Quint character. And the premise of the play is during the filming of this, when they're out in the ocean, Bruce, the mechanical shark, breaks down. And it breaks down for hours. So this play is about the 3 of them passing time while someone tries to fix the shark. I guess they didn't get along kind of off screen. Yeah. I don't think Robert Shaw cared very much for Richard Dreyfuss, which I get. I don't like him much either. But anyway, so as a side note, if anyone has seen that, let me know, because I'd love to. I've seen snippets on YouTube. It looks fantastic. But anyway, we're going to need a bigger boat.
Hey, Mike, I gotta throw something in. And Greg
Please.
and I have seen this before. We had a little fun with it a month or 2 ago. There is a neat shot, and it must be from when the big mechanical shark breaks down, because Robert Shaw is on the back of the prop boat, and he's either reading a book, he's got his legs crossed, he's really relaxed, and right beside him is this massive mechanical shark, and it's just a great little scene. I have to go back and dig that out, but Greg, I think we messed around and added your infamous hashtag startup life to that scene, Greg, right? Finding peace where no matter what's going on around you. Is that right, Greg?
That's right. Well, you know what else I just discovered is the reason that the big great white shark in Finding Nemo is named Bruce is probably because Bruce the mechanical shark.
Yes.
I just thought about that.
Yes.
Okay, I'm just having a Eureka moment, an epiphany.
So that was some great movie insight for somebody to do that.
It looks like Catherine has found the show. The shark is broken. So Catherine, thank you very much. Again, if anyone has seen it, I'd love to hear. It looks fantastic. So that one's kind of a no-brainer. The second one from Top Gun, I feel the need for speed, right? Where everyone's talking about how do we get our supply chains faster. And then the last one from The Wizard of Oz, we're not in Kansas anymore. And I think the reason that resonated with me is our supply chains are now so much different. They don't look anything like they used to look. Even before the pandemic, supply chains were starting to evolve. So when I think about this idea of agility and resilience, those 3 things came to mind. Okay.
So let's pause there for a second. So the first trend is that agility and resilience, and Mike's already dropped a lot of different references there. Greg, respond to that. What comes to your mind when you think of some of those themes and movies that Mike laid out there?
Yeah, well, I mean, agility and resilience is what supply chain is about. I've always contended that it is not a cost-saving exercise, regardless of the way that we've managed it from the beginning of time. But it is instead a risk-balancing exercise. It is trying to preempt problems as much as you can and responding as quickly as you possibly can when you cannot. I always often quote Mike on this whole notion of rewarding the arsonist, right? Where the culture of supply chain has become to kind of ignore all of the possible faults, flaws, fragilities in a supply chain, and then reward ourselves for letting it collapse and then stacking it back together. So I think that one of the things we have to acknowledge is that we have to predict and preempt these fragilities. And that's what resiliency really is. So, can I give you a movie reference?
Please.
It's not particular to these trends, but this is sort of a symptom of supply chain. So my movie reference is Titanic, which is overhyped and under engineered technology operated with hubris and carelessness in threatening waters, dangerous waters, which we often do in supply chain.
That's an excellent point.
I mean, I think, Greg, that's a great example, because if you think about the other message I think about when I think about Titanic is the kind of the conflict of goals, right? Because you have the white line, or the White Star Line says we need to get from point A to point B as fast as we can.
Right.
Don't really care, what's in the water.
Right.
The captain is trying to say, he doesn't do a very good job of it, obviously. The captain is trying to say, well, wait a minute. There's some risk here. We need to slow down. We need to think about a different course. So you've got these conflicting goals, which everyone deals with in real life, right? One part of the business wants this, another part of the business wants that. That's a great example, Greg, Titanic, of those conflicting goals and what can happen if you don't find a way to work that out. Obviously, for many organizations, it's not as bad as hitting an iceberg in the Titanic, but it could be, right? If you don't figure out how to navigate that.
It's the risk of losing the entirety of your cargo.
Yes.
Excellent point. All right. So before we move on to the second trend, I think I can share this graphic, thanks to Catherine, because I want to go back to the play. I think it's a play. This is The Shark is Broken,
Yes.
I believe. Right, Mike?
Yes, that is it.
That
is it. Catherine, thank you so much.
Ian Shaw, I guess, is Robert Shaw's son, and I guess his partner there, Joseph Nixon. So y'all check that out. And 5-star reviews from the Times, Sunday Mirror, the Telegraph, you name it. So we will have to check that out.
There's snippets on YouTube, and again, I'll date myself. If anyone has seen Robert Shaw in Jaws or The Deep or The Guns of Navarone, his son looks and sounds exactly like him. It's unbelievable. I mean, I guess you would expect that from a sibling or a child, but yeah, it's uncanny how much he looks and sounds like his dad.
I wonder if he can sing Farewell and Adieu as well as Robert Shaw can, because that's one of my favorite songs.
Which one was that, Greg?
Farewell and adieu to you, fair Spanish ladies. Remember when he's singing that as the boat is sinking?
Yes.
Or right before they get hit by the shark, also.
Yes.
Greg, that is a great call out, man. You don't miss a thing, never. Andre says, I think resilience shines through in the movie The Revenant. Now, I'm not sure if I've seen that movie. Have y'all seen, Greg, Mike?
I have
if
not.
I recall right, it's about some guy up in some godforsaken cold wasteland.
Yes.
Looking for somebody. I don't remember. Or being looked for. I don't remember.
All right.
I think I've seen it.
Leonardo DiCaprio, as Amanda reminds us.
Okay. So Tom Hardy and Leonardo DiCaprio. Okay, I'll have to check that out. All right. So let's see here. Mom, Leah Luton says, no shark movie since Jaws has been so scary. The music itself was scary.
Great. I wouldn't even. So we lived in Springfield, Missouri at the time, and I wouldn't even go in the lake. We went fishing every weekend and skiing.
Yes.
Lake of the Ozarks and Lake or Table Rock Lake, and I would not go in the lake for weeks after that.
Yes.
I'm with you. I got to be able to see my toes, I got to be able to see my toes. All right. So that's just the first trend. So I think, and I'm going to circle back to some of these other comments here in a second, but let's move to trend number 2, Mike.
Yeah, trend number 2, I think we've talked about this as well on this show, is a redefinition that is happening around how people think about their supply chains. And and the movies that come to mind for me, and I actually have 4, because something that Greg said triggered another thought. So I've got 4. The first is, and we joked with Catherine, she's going to have to look all these up. So Cool Hand Luke, right? What we have here is a failure to communicate.
Amen.
Right? And I think understanding what we want our supply chains to do and the supply chains communicating what they can do, I think is huge. Casablanca, what we have here is the beginning of a beautiful friendship, right? I think more and more organizations are starting to see the value that their supply chain can bring. So what popped into my head, Greg, when you were talking, when I think about value, is Jerry Maguire's Show Me the Money, right? Supply chains are now being asked to help CEOs with things like revenue growth, entry into markets, show me the money. And then, with having 6 grandkids, I get exposed to a lot of kids' movies. My favorite line from the movie A Bug's Life is the #1 rule of leadership: everything is your fault. And, people raise their hands, right, and say, how many times have you heard it's all the supply chain's fault, right? So we need to start to figure out how do we change that narrative a little bit. But those were the 4 movies that came to mind when I think about how people are redefining their supply chain.
I love that. All right, 2 quick thoughts. I'm going to come to you, Greg. First off, I've heard that Bug's Life quote from Greg countless times over our friendship, #1. And #2, our dear friend Jenny Froome's with us. Greg singing. I am so glad I checked in, she says. Jenny, we love you. Great to have you here. All right, so Greg, redefinition. And of course, Mike just dropped some serious content on us there.
Yeah, I don't know what movie this is. I'm not sure what movie to tie it to, but maybe it's the one with Nicole Kidman. What has been seen cannot be unseen, right? And that's the thing that I think has really redefined the supply chain. I think for all of our kvetching about wanting more credibility and a seat at the table and that sort of thing, we didn't really know what that meant. And after, what I'm going to talk about, Scott, the great toilet paper shortage of 2020, everyone knows what a supply chain is. Everyone knows what it does. And everyone knows that at some level, everyone is at fault if a supply chain fails. It's not just Target or Costco's fault. It's not just the retail-facing entities for retail goods. It's everyone, right? It's Charmin, it's the paper providers, it's, the pulp processors, whatever. So I think that is a really and very important thing. We keep saying, and I will disagree till the day that I die, we keep saying that supply chains are more disruptive, whatever, than they've ever been. That's absolutely untrue. I don't believe that one bit. It's just that nobody gave a damn before because nobody knew what supply chain was or did. And to Mike's point, it was the supply chain failed, Mike. It's your fault. End of discussion. Not what could we do about it. Not what did we do to crack the fragilities that we knew existed in the supply chain, right? What unreasonable demands we put on the supply chain or lack of preparation we had in the supply chain. It was just, it failed. End of discussion. So now that it's been seen, I think we consumers, have actually forced companies to examine their supply chain more thoroughly. And why? Because there's nowhere to hide, and more is at stake than delivering goods here. Your brand equity is at stake. Think about how many companies just after the pandemic went down the tubes because they couldn't deliver. Right? I mean, Peloton exploded with demand, right? So they shipped everything at an unsustainable cost and crushed the company, right? I mean, those are discussions that literally guys like Mike and I have been having for decades. Is sure we can get it here faster, and sure we can give you 100% fill rate, but it's going to cost more than the company can afford. So I think that's visibility of the entire world to supply chain is the thing that has impacted it the most.
All right, Mike.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more, Greg. I think the part that you said around getting a seat at the table, I think what resonates the most with me when we talk to clients, one of the things we try to do is when we give them advice, it's what are you signing up for if you want to take advantage of this advice? And I think one of the things we as supply chain professionals, as Greg said very well, we always wanted a seat at the table, but I don't think we ever really knew what that meant. And we didn't know what we were signing up for when we decided to get a seat at the big people's table. And now that we have it, it's how do we keep it and how do we not get relegated to the perception that people had of us pre-pandemic? Because if I look at some of our research data, what we're seeing is in less performing companies, the supply chain is now starting to get moved out of that seat at the table. High performing companies recognize what they have with a really good supply chain, and they're keeping that seat at the table. So my advice to people, our advice to people when they talk to us and we talk to them is you need to continue to demonstrate relevance. You need to continue to show the business, this is why we're here, and this is the value that we can create. And if you don't do that, right, and this is I guess a soccer reference, I don't know what it means, you're going to get relegated. And I'm assuming it's a bad thing in soccer to get relegated.
It is.
We know it's a bad thing to get relegated in the supply chain.
So to our non-soccer fans, perhaps, if you watch baseball, getting relegated is kind of like getting pushed down from the major leagues to AAA or AA because of your performance. Greg?
Not one player, the entire franchise.
Right. Good
That
point.
would be like that would be like the Yankees getting moved to AAA, which this season is.
That might happen.
Probably should have happened, right?
All right, man, y'all shared a ton there. I just want to add just two quick things. Cool Hand Luke, one of my all-time favorites. So many good scenes from that. But when he does eat those 50 boiled eggs, it makes me not want eggs for about 3 years. And then secondly, yeah, Greg, you mentioned TP. It's so interesting. I didn't know that we had a major issue across the global toilet paper market. But if y'all seen the recent announcement, I think it's Charmin. I could have that wrong. They have re-engineered how each sheet is the perforation between it. So, and from what I've been reading, not experimenting with, but reading, so you can pull it and tear it easily from any angle. I didn't think that was an issue to spend a whole bunch of money on doing, but Greg and Mike, I'll defer your consumers as well. Is that valuable or non-valuable? What are y'all's thoughts?
Yeah,
we're talking about using toilet paper here.
Right. No. The perforation changes.
Yeah, well, that's when you use the perforation.
Right.
So,
well, right.
I'm thinking it's potentially solving a problem, to your point, Scott, that I didn't know we had. Because it always tears just fine for me. So I didn't know there was a challenge. So in my house, as long as and this will probably start a short debate amongst everyone in everyone's household, as long as the toilet paper is coming over the top in my house, life is good.
That's the way the patent describes it, by the way, for a toilet paper roll. So,
oh gosh!
Well, saying that is the right way by law.
This brings, whether it's valuable or non-valuable, this brings a whole new angle to a conversation around muda or waste. So we will leave it there. And
why do I have a feeling, Scott, that these are the same people who can't unwrap Kraft singles?
That's a great question. Great question. All right. So let's share a couple things here. Andre wants us to imagine the disruption when the wheel was first invented. How about that? Can you imagine how long it took to get on or catch on across the globe? Great point there. Jenny enjoys all the movie lines. Very clever, Mike. Let's see. Great to see you, Muhammad. Great to see you here. And we will work through each of these, the rest of the comments here as we work through the rest of the show. All right, Greg and Mike, really quick blurb. Before we hit the third trend, Greg, again, it's all about resources. We want to share one more resource with our audience here today, coming up on October 19th, 12 noon, where our friends from Enable are joining us again. From numbers to strategy, how finance drives data-driven supply chains. Y'all join us for that. It's free to attend. You just got to register. Greg, should be another great show with our friends at Enable, huh?
Well, it's a big part of supply chain that we often leave out. People got to get paid, right? I mean, paying for the shipment, paying for the goods it's part of the supply chain.
That's right.
What makes it go.
That's right. All right. So, Mike, so by my count, the first trend, I can't keep up with all the movie references, but the first trend is agility and resilience. The second one was that redefinition, which I think is a great one that's not talked about enough. And then thirdly, what's your third trend here today?
So this is one where I might need some help from the audience and from you guys around some quotes. I have one. The third trend is just a focus on people, right? When I think about where we want to go as a supply chain, right? We can have all the technology we want in the world. At the end of the day, it does come down to people. It comes down to skills. It comes down to relationships. The hottest topic that we have right now in Gartner, which will not be a surprise to anyone, is generative AI. And that's all well and good, but we still need to figure out as people, how are we going to use that? So the quote that I found, and I frankly never read the books, haven't seen any of the movies. It's from the Fellowship of the Rings, which basically said the quote is, even the smallest of people can change the course of the future. And when I saw that quote, it really resonated with me because part of my team that I manage looks after supply chain talent. And when I think about how we think about our people, I think it's very easy for us to kind of gloss over certain positions within our organizations. And I think this quote really resonated with me from the standpoint that you never know where the next great idea is going to come from in your organizations. You never know what role or team is going to play a critical role in the success of your supply chain, right? I mean, Greg and I have a soft spot for demand planners, right? It could be an individual forecaster or an individual demand planner that is demand planning for a critical SKU or component within your portfolio. You just never know. And I think it's important that organizations canvas their organizations looking for those types of up and coming performance and future leaders, because you never know where they're going to come from. So that was one. And then as I was thinking about when you were kind of transitioning this section, one of my all-time favorite movies, my wife and I have this debate every time it's on TV, is Saving Private Ryan. It lost the Best Picture Oscar to Shakespeare in Love. We have this huge debate every time Shakespeare in Love is on. Oh, it won the best Oscar. No, it shouldn't have. Whatever. but there's a line in Saving Private Ryan where they're kind of as a group trying to figure out the value of expending all of this energy to find one person. And there's an interaction where the individual members of the platoon are all griping about kind of the energy they're expending to find one person. And there's this dialogue around basically, how do you complain, right? Soldiers can complain up, officers never complain down. And I think, not that I'm talking necessarily about complaining, but this idea of feedback. How do you give feedback? How do you give constructive feedback in an organization? I think is another element to this idea of people. And I think if you look at highly successful organizations, one of the things they've figured out is how do they talk to each other relative to constructive feedback.
Excellent point, Mike. I tell you, it can be challenging. I think all of us, I know I've had plenty of challenges in leaning into that constructive feedback, but that's one of the best ways to get better. Greg, weigh in on his third trend there, that focus on the people.
Well, I mean, I think of it, this isn't really a movie line, but out of the mouths of babes, one of the things that I think we should relish in business generally, but supply chain definitely, is this notion of the blessing of naivete, of someone who doesn't know any better saying, why don't we do it this way?
Right.
That is, so powerful, because I can't tell you the number of times I have seen or heard it myself where somebody says, well, why don't we do this? And you think, well, I've been doing it for 25 years the other way. I never even thought about doing it that way. Right. And of course we could do that. So I think that notion of enabling people, regardless of what their stature, their tenure, their, position is really important. Think about how many times you might have been standing in a store or a warehouse and got a great idea from, the stocking clerk or the forklift driver or, right? Or a receiving clerk or whatever. The guy who sweeps the floors, right? Okay, there's a good movie reference for you, right? Which is, oh my God, totally forgot it.
Oh no.
I don't want to do the one I want to do, which is, hey, motherfucker. Bubba, it's Bubba, isn't it? Definitely Bubba. No, it's the notion of walking through a NASA warehouse and asking the person who's sweeping the floor, what's your job here? And that person says, my job is to put a man on the moon. So I think that's everyone's job. And everyone has some insight to putting a man on the moon, or, products into motion, or service levels to a higher level, whatever it is. So I think that's one of the things we definitely have to do, is open the door, because we have so many naive people coming into the workforce. They know nothing about the workforce. And we had so many people who held all of the knowledge in their heads that we never captured, right? The great resignation was virtually all baby boomers. And so much of what they knew was never captured. And now we have people who know nothing, literally in many cases, about supply chain, or even, how to undertake a job, because we're introducing so many people to the workforce now. But still, there is wisdom in that naivete, and I think it's important to enable the ability to capture it.
Excellent point. Excellent point. And Mike, going back to how you kind of opened it, I love that quote. Now, I'm not gonna get it right, but basically, anybody, anywhere can impact the future, no matter where they are, where they work, how much experience. To your point, Greg, what they've done. I'm really big believer in that. And you know what? Kind of going back to Jenny's point, this is why conversations around DEI are so important.
Yeah.
Jenny, I'm with you. You want to bring everybody into the room to have the conversations, because we all look at the problem, the opportunity a lot different, just based on, what our walk of life has been. So love your third one of the focus on the people. One other thing from Jenny, really quick, and I may not, we're covering up Mike a little too much here. I want to share this. Jenny says, Jenny says she got this thing from Dr. Faith Michelle. It might be Michelle Lee, but Michelle, this acronym BANI, BANI. We're living in a BANI world: brittle, anxious, nonlinear, incomprehensible. And she says, I'm sure it's well known, and maybe I just listened for once, but that and VUCA, VUCA, which we've talked about before, pretty much make supply chain professionals' jobs pretty tricky. Okay, so Mike and Greg, we are going to get, as we start to wrap here with Mike, one of my favorite questions we've been asking the last few months is one Eureka moment. And you've shared a few already, but what's one Eureka moment gleaned from your conversations, those kind of confidential sidebar conversations with business leaders over the last month, that you think would really intrigue folks here today?
Yeah, I think, excuse me, that there's just a continued emphasis on diversification of people's manufacturing strategies, right? I think we've talked in the past year. We have a lot of research on this idea of China plus one. Now I think people are trying to kind of maybe replace China with somebody else and a plus one. I think the challenge with that, and Greg, we've spoken about this collectively numerous times, is there's been so much investment in what I would call infrastructure in interacting with China, that it's very hard to just unplug that and plug that in someplace else. I think people are looking and trying to explore how to do that. I think they're looking to find, we talked a little bit about this, I think last month, with some of the semiconductor work that's going on and some of the movement of facilities. But I think it really comes down to, where can you do that already has some underlying infrastructure to support you? And can you get an advantage about being in some of these new markets first, so that you have kind of the first access to what in some of these countries is going to be a limited infrastructure in terms of how much new stuff they can support. So I think the topic that I would share is just the continuation around diversification and being very mindful and having a strategy around that, right? I think there was a lot of knee-jerk reactions that said, hey, we're going to get out of China. But again, to our earlier conversation, what does that really mean, right? What are you signing up for if that's your strategy? And I think there's still a lot of work to be done around that diversification strategy.
Well said, Mike, and completely agree. That knee-jerk reaction. Greg, I don't know if you remember, right when the pandemic hit the States, and fully throated, right? March 2019, I think it was, right after Modex, I think. If you remember, Greg, we were getting reached out to some folks that right there, they were ready to pull everything back to the States. Not taking into account a lot of things you just shared there, Mike, about just the sheer reality and some of the constraints and this, that, and the other. But Greg, react to what Mike shared there.
Yeah, I mean, I think, we've seen a lot of nearshoring and reshoring and whatever you want to call it, friendshoring over the course of the last several years. And we talked with Enrique at Vector, whose business in Mexico is booming because of it, right? And he sees a lot booming there, but it's a very difficult proposition because China is the largest workforce on the planet by an order of magnitude, right? And additionally, they are both culturally and politically compelled to be very, very thorough, hardworking, structured people, right? I mean, let's think about this. This is a culture that built one of the largest armies in the world out of clay, not people, out of clay, to honor one emperor. So, I mean, this is a very driven culture, and you can't duplicate that on any one place. And I would argue there are entire continents where you can't duplicate that. You sure can't do it in North America. I mean, and certainly not for the price. So it's a very difficult proposition. And as if we haven't had enough inflation already, just try doing, I mean, UAW is showing us every reason why people don't want to bring labor back to the United States, right?
Yep.
So it's going to be a very, very difficult proposition. And I think that's something that we have to look out for is, I don't know the way. It's not to say that I haven't heard the way, but this is where we could use some of that blessing of naivete is, hey, what if we did X?
Yeah.
Because a lot of what we've talked about is automation, but guess where 95% of all of the materials that are required for automation come from? China. So it's a catch-22, but we have to put some really good heads around that to figure out how to tackle that. But we can't do it. I think, Mike, to your point, it has to be a series of moderations, not a series of pendulum swings.
Yep.
All right. More to come. I wish we had a couple more hours with the two of y'all and, of course, all the folks in the cheap seats. But, Mike, before we let you go, let's make sure you tell us what's coming up next at Gartner.
Yeah, two big events for anyone that is watching or going to watch. If you're interested in planning in any level, we have two planning summits, one at the end of this month in London, one the end of the month in November in Phoenix. I'll actually be there. If people want to come up and say hi and get together, just let me know. But if it's all things planning, whether you own a planning team or whether you are a demand planner, whether you're a technology person with systems questions, or even a potential sponsor who sells planning solutions. We launched this just before the pandemic. We had a planning summit in Denver. It was wildly successful. Pandemic hit, we shut all that stuff down. So we've restarted them this year. Attendance is already ahead of schedule in both events. So anyone that's interested, please consider joining us in October in London. Can't guarantee the weather there, November in Phoenix, there's probably not too many places better than being in Phoenix in November.
All right. And to that end, if folks want to check out information on those events, or if they want to connect with you, the one and only Mike Griswold, how can folks connect with you, Mike?
LinkedIn, or just send me an email, mike.griswold@gartner.com. Enjoy the conversations.
It is just that easy. All right. So Greg, one of our favorite guests, long-running series, very popular series. We get a lot of feedback on. We just wrapped the latest episode. Mike, thank you for your time. Really enjoyed you and Greg's banner each month on the first Wednesday of each month at 12 noon Eastern time. Greg, another great episode before we let Mike go, huh?
Yeah, I love it. I mean, someone who's been there, done that, Mike, and who's still so tapped into so many of the people doing the doing every single day. So that I live for that Eureka moment at the end of these episodes, man. Thank you for bringing that to it.
Usually the smartest person in the room, Mike Griswold, Vice President Analyst with Gartner. Mike, always a pleasure. We will talk with you soon.
Sounds good. Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.
All right, Greg, production, Catherine and Amanda, they got to be quick on the swoosh there, because when Mike's done, he is out, right? He's got a busy schedule. So it's been neat to have him on once a month for what? We've been 3.5 years now.
Is it that long? Wow.
Sounds about right. But I'm with you, Jenny. I should have shared this before, Mike. Mike Griswold, you always bring such great insights to the show. I agree. Getting him and Greg together, outstanding. Andre says 300 million people working 9 to 10 hours a day. Very hard to beat China. Good point there. And also, don't forget, folks, we dropped in the links. You're one click away from checking out the webinars and newsletters. We try to make it easy. All right, before we wrap, Greg, I want to circle back on one point around, what was it? Naivete. I said it right? Naivete. Close. It's good to have that naivete in meetings. I just wish that they haven't cornered the market in naivete in Washington, D.C., right? We need it in doses, not in mass. Would you agree, Greg?
Yeah, it's not naivete in D.C. It's cognitive dissonance. Yeah.
That's what it is.
So they know what they're doing.
Okay. All right. So, Greg, before we wrap, we've covered a lot of ground here today. I had some fun doing it while talking about some really serious, meaty supply chain topics, you name it. What was one thing that you want to point out, Greg, that out of everything we talked about, or what Mike shared, you name it, what's one thing you think folks should take away from this conversation?
I think it's that resiliency and agility is the business of supply chain. It is the business of preempting and assuring that your goods, that your brand promise, that your brand equity and identity get to market in the means in which you desire. And that you, to whatever extent you can, you predict and preempt the problems you can see coming, or at least the outcomes of problems that could hit you. And you respond and recover quickly, because all that's at stake is your entire business.
That's all. That's all that's at stake. Love that, Greg. And enjoyed your the Titanic reference on the front end. That was one of my favorite ones, because it's dangerous to be building and engineering with hubris. If I said that word right. All right. One other point I want to call out. So Jessica DePino's a dear friend. She joined me on the show a year or so ago. Folks, Jessica loves teaching, and that passion came out by the truckload when she joined us. So Jessica, great to have you here, and thanks for your comment here. Interesting insights on the talent landscape, the multi-generational workforce, and the BANI acronym. I agree, Jessica. And may we all have the good fortune of learning from folks that love to teach and are good at it. Jessica, Greg, you remember one of your favorite passionate and talented teachers? What's the first teacher that comes to mind when you think of someone that you would just loved to learn from?
Polly Welsh, my English teacher in 9th grade. Yeah.
Love that.
She used to say things first of all, she was a great teacher, just an exceptional teacher. And she used to say things like, when you would do something stupid, trying to be cool in class, she would say things like, "How embarrassing for you."
Oh man, I'm about to use that one.
Right.
In the parenting realm. We'll see.
Right. How
Polly,
embarrassing for you.
Polly
So
Welsh.
I just remember that.
Polly Welsh. Is that right?
Yeah. Polly Welsh.
Oh,
Yeah.
awesome. Love that.
She didn't allow you to chew gum in class, which was a problem in the 80s, not for maybe these days. Now it's
Cell
don't
phones.
throw the desk at the teacher or pull a gun in class.
Man. And I'll just counter that with Gloria Marks. I've talked about her today. I was fortunate to have tons of wonderful, wonderful teachers, but Gloria Marks, she was a master at storytelling, and it really sticks out from third grade English to this day. All right, folks. Hopefully you enjoyed this wide-ranging episode as much as Greg and I have. Mike always brings it, and then Greg always brings it, so made for quite the
You
last
always
hour.
bring it home for us.
We try.
Yeah.
We try. Hollywood Week for this month's edition of Supply Chain Today and Tomorrow with Mike Griswold from Gartner. So, folks, but whatever you do, hey, take a nugget, because there was lots of practical nuggets that Greg and Mike shared here, and including folks in the comments. Take a nugget, put it in action. Deeds, not words. That's the name of the game. On behalf of our entire team here at Supply Chain Now, Scott Luton challenging you to do good, to give forward, and to be the change. We'll see you next time right back here at Supply Chain Now. Thanks, everybody.